Hi everyone, this is Svava Brooks. I'm happy you're joining us for Take Your Power Back interview series. I want to tell you what I'm up to here because I've been on the healing journey for over 20 years myself, and I have a big passion for helping survivors heal, learn how to live, love, and succeed after childhood trauma. And I know it's hard to find the right tools and the resources when you're on the healing journey and wanting to understand the impact of what happened to you. And that's why I started this series to interview wonderful experts and professionals that are sharing their unique approach to healing and restoring after childhood abuse and trauma. So today I'm very excited to introduce to you to a very special guest who comes from my home country, Iceland. Welcome, Guðni.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
I feel like I should welcome you in our native tongue. Velkomin, Guðni.
Takk fyrir in my native tongue.
That's right. That's right. So Guðni is obviously here to share with us his experience in working with people. And I want to just share with you a few things from his bio, and then I'm going to ask him some questions and invite him to share with us his passion about, having been in the industry. I was looking over your bio for, over 35 years now, correct?
Yes.
Yes, right. So let's start with here. Fitness and life consultant Guðni is a native of Iceland, like I just said, has been instrumental in the Icelandic yoga and fitness industry for the past 35 years. You started it, in 1982, you founded a bodybuilding incorporated, a private gym. And maybe a little side note, I used to work out there, right? Many, many years ago when I was going to college in Iceland. Oh my goodness, that takes you back, right? And that has now grown into, or used to be and was, the leading import retail fitness company, and later became Health Inc., the leading fitness retailer in Iceland. So your bio goes on and on. You've clearly made an impact on the holistic fitness, the mind-body awareness in Iceland. And then in the 1990, you went to LA. So why don't we start there and ask you, Guðni, what brought you to LA? And then I know you're back in Iceland. So what happened in between those stops?
Well, it was interesting because I was approximately 35 years old and had recently gone through a separation or a divorce. And I wanted to change my perspective or my horizon. And I had thought about going to New York or London even and sort of educate myself, but at the same time continue my work. And then a producer, I was actually in Iceland, married to a client's friend, came to my studio and said, I wish there was someone like you in Los Angeles. I've never experienced any of, this holistic mind, body, spiritual approach to well-being, where the intention is to come from love and harmony, not fear and low self-image. And I said, well, that could be arranged. He knew nothing about my plans to go abroad, but I said, why not? Why not Los Angeles just as New York? It sounds good. 2 months later, I was sitting on his doorstep, and from there, I began a 16-year journey in Los Angeles.
Wow. So was it there that you developed the rope yoga?
To some degree, I had been working with the apparatus, the pulley mechanism that in Iceland that I had strengthened and developed to a degree, but the crafter, what we call the glow motion crafter, or the vehicle for glow motion core, which is rope yoga at the same time, was developed in Los Angeles and engineered there.
Mm-hmm. What I love about what you do is that you went from the physical fitness into kind of the mind, body, and mind especially, which you talk a lot about how can kind of take over and run our lives unless we are aware and pay attention. And one of my favorite things that I have to tell you, your voice is in my head a lot because I keep thinking about responsibility. Like that was such a big aha moment for me. I know we're going to go through some questions, but I just want to go right in there. How did you connect like the need from physical wellness to the mind and the responsibility for your taking good care of your body? You also had to take good care of your mind.
Well, I think that, well, I don't think, I know actually that it comes from my past, my background. Although my background, especially my teenage years, were incredibly tumultuous because of my parents' abuse, substance abuse. Then I knew at the age of 13 that I was completely responsible for my life and what I did with it.
Wow.
I didn't know what to do with it, and but I knew that, and there was some instinctual process. My parents were spiritual and mindful, and even though my mother had these big challenges with alcohol, then she taught me everything about compassion and love, and later about resentment and rejection, which was a necessary evolutionary path in my own growing, but very wonderful woman that became very, very toxic. My father, on the other hand, was a fisherman, and he was away quite a bit. And he didn't have a lot of time to attend to my upbringing, but he would sow these sayings like, birds of the same feather flock together, and show me your friends, and I can tell you your wit. And so, and these things, they sort of became a part of my fabric, and I knew instinctually that the energy that I have, the energy, my awareness, has a consequence, and how I direct that energy has impact. So it's been with me, but then we get into another part of the dialogue, and that becomes our self-worth. And our self-worth, our perception, our perspective of how we view ourselves also determines what I call the permission base. How much permission do you have to receive love and prosperity? And because it's almost like operating a mechanism to a large, which to a large degree is completely subconscious, unconscious for most people.
Yes.
But it runs your life. We think we run our lives. If we're not conscious, we don't. Our programs do.
Exactly.
And to awaken means to awaken to the fact that you're not your thoughts, your essence, your spirit, your awareness, your light. And just on a side note, we don't understand what light means, but light is the energy that holds particles and waves, and it's the only essence of that. And people don't realize either, most of them don't, or even it's hard for me to grasp it, that light travels 3 times around the globe while I blink an eye. That's the source.
Wow.
So awakening to the process and realizing that we're not our thoughts is the first step in my journey. But then we get into another incredibly powerful process, which I call step number 2, and that is responsibility. The question you were asking,
yes,
responsibility. What does it mean to be responsible? And my contention is that it means to be able to respond. And once you do, you're no longer compulsive, addictive, reactive, and obsessive. And it's the most powerful term I know of. If we speak of empowerment, that's really the core of empowerment.
Yes, yeah.
But there's a precursor here, because we cannot be responsible unless we forgive ourselves. It's impossible.
Yeah.
So precursor for responsibility is forgiveness.
Yes.
Precursor for forgiveness is responsibility. So they go hand in hand.
Yes, that's a powerful cycle, and that's exactly why I wanted you to come and be a part of the summit, because I think that piece that you speak to, that it's our choice to bring the past back into the future, and yes, it is subconscious on some level, but if you really focus on being present in your body and understand that you have the same access to light and to love and to wholeness today as you did the day you were born, you have the power to rupture this cycle. But you touch upon, some really challenging things for victims of abuse or trauma. They've been hurt by other people. It's been planted very deep, so it becomes who they think they are. As yes. I know you see this in all people, even those that haven't been severely traumatized. But I just love how simply and beautifully you lay this out, and it's all about empowering us to wake up, I think, to wait a minute, I can do this. And then my own responsibility is to hold myself accountable in how I respond, right? Being respond able.
See, energy doesn't, you can't waste it. You can't destroy it. No one has. But you can invest it or devote it to something. And, my favorite saying is, everything that you devote your awareness to is going to grow and expand. And everybody agrees. And then I say to people, if you agree to that, you also have to acknowledge that when you think about what you don't want, you're actually wanting it. So then we get into the other dialogue of responsibility. What responsibility means is that you have literally taken back your power, the ability to respond. You become present and powerful, and therefore you can allocate the energy at will to whatever it is you decide you want. Then we get into another beautiful dilemma or opportunity, depending on the perspective you hold, and that is, what do you want? What do we want? What is the intention? And when I ask people, most of the time, they have a very challenging time defining what the journey is, what they want, and how they want to allocate their energy. And that leaves you with something else, because the mind can't process two things at the same time. So if you're not thinking about what you want or desire, which is a beautiful, beautiful term coming from inspire, then you're thinking about what you don't want. And since 97% of our energy, at least, revolves around yesterday's thoughts today, then we keep recreating our reality, however painful it is, again and again and again. Now, this is what I call the spell. And the only way to break the spell is to define what you want, because although we don't understand it, the payoff is the addiction to the pain. That's the substance that we subscribe to.
It's interesting to hear you say that we are the ones who sustain those thoughts, and we sustain that pain when we could be choosing from this moment going forward. So how does one choose, or where do you start to just be aware and present in the moment, if we just start there?
Usually it takes quite a bit of discomfort to
Yes.
awaken your being. And on average, we have 3 opportunities in this lifetime to awaken to the fact that we're spirit. But then the second aspect of that second step has to be forgiveness, forgiving ourselves. We can't forgive other people. We don't have the power to do that. We can only relieve ourselves. The moment you do, you restore your energy, you retrieve it from the resentment or the blame or the mistakes or whatever you deem it to be, because consciously or unconsciously, you have to blame someone else in order to sustain victimhood or martyrhood. So the moment you forgive yourself, you're no longer the victim, you are the creator. And that is the ability to, again, allocate the energy differently. Now, one of the things that we don't, or are learning to understand, is that the moment we let go of animosity, resentment, rejection, and resentment, we retrieve the energy. That retrieves our self-respect, because that's really our power. And the moment that happens, there's no need or requirement to punish or blame or to avenge, not them, but ourselves. Because if you abandon and reject yourself, you're setting up a cycle that leads to rejection and avengement. There has to be a revenge or a punishment taken out for somebody that's doing you injustice, and on some level, you're doing the injustice.
That's
so
powerful.
it's a very interesting process. And for instance, I've been working with people for 35 years approximately, and there's only one challenge that I've encountered with every one of my clients or my friends or the people I've actually had the pleasure of engaging with, and that is, they don't want themselves. Period. They don't want the circumstances they've created. They don't want the life they have. They don't want their body shape. They just don't want to be who they are, where they are with themselves. So that's why forgiveness is crucial. There is really, if you don't forgive yourself, you can't really exist as a being of light.
Yeah.
You can only survive as a shadow.
Yes. And you keep searching outside of yourself for that light, and
Yes.
and asking others to validate and approve of you, which they can't, right? Because
Well,
the minute you go out there, right, and you ask someone to approve of you, you have rejected yourself, right?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Not only that, but because you're coming from rejection, you're going to find somebody that operates on the harmony or the resonance of rejection.
Yes.
And you're intending to get them to do the dirty work, that is, to love you, and you don't. So it's a very interesting process. People will call that codependency, but codependency doesn't exist. The only thing that does exist is not being response-able.
Mm-hmm. So talk about the discomfort. You said it makes people uncomfortable. What do you say to people about that discomfort? What's that about?
How much pain does it take you to realize that you've been doing the same thing again and again and again for this many years, expecting different results? So how much pain, how much tolerance do you have to awaken to the consequences of your own behavior towards yourself? And it's usually a burnout. It could be a divorce. It could be a collision with the energies, whatever they are, car collisions, or some kind of collision with the energy of life, where you're rendered incapacitated and have a point or window to look at your patterns and realize that you have to change something or break. And you only get approximately three opportunities. And if you don't awaken after those three opportunities, you're going to sail into what we call a constant state of disease.
Wow.
And the older we get, the more challenging it becomes to retrieve ourselves,
yes.
because ego is looking out for you.
That's right.
It's always looking out for you. And the only thing that the ego cares about is proving you right. So whether you argue for your limitations or your greatness, ego supports you 100%.
Yeah, it's powerful. I really resonates what you're speaking about. I use a little different terms when I'm working with people, but it's really about reconnecting with yourself, and very often, and kind of, I say, instead of fighting and pushing back on this resistance, why don't you befriend it?
Yes.
Because resistance will just create more resistance. But instead of thank you for keeping me safe, thank you for looking out for me, but we're going to try something else now.
Absolutely. Nothing will persist unless you resist.
Yes.
But interestingly enough, in our conversation before, we talked about fitness and how I came to this realization of mind-body process. I've always known that there is no mind-body connection. There doesn't need to be one because it's one. So there is no separation. However, if we don't live in our bodies, if we don't acknowledge that our body is the mother, the earth, the vehicle, the vessel, then we don't exist because we're not on the planet.
Yeah.
So your vehicle, your process, your faculties are your senses and your ability to feel. And feeling is being, not thinking.
Yes. Yes. Well, I can tell you it's been interesting looking for experts to share their wisdom here on this summit. And I can find a lot of people that deal with this, like the mental health and even the emotional health. But the connection, to really talk about to that truth that we are connected, and our heart health, in terms of spirit, it's been interesting. It's been interesting to see. But I think, more people are waking up to this connection. And certainly, to me, the journey for me was from here to here. And that's what I was just telling you earlier. What I love about your book that you are going to tell us a little more about is that it doesn't speak to my mind, because my mind wants to reject it and know this can't be. But my heart really, it resonates. Like, yes, this feels like the truth, and that's where I've found the change happens. So,
thank you for saying that. And the reason is I wrote it from my heart, from integrity of my heart, and it's about sincerity, and it's about realizing that I'm a human being, and that I what I do and how I do it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be, what's the word I'm looking for? if we don't want to tell the truth, we'll never be liberated. And the only power we truly have is to express that reality, that how we feel. And I'm glad that resonates.
It really does. So I wanted to thank you. I get teary just saying it because, I can't speak this way to everybody. So when I find someone who speaks my heart language, I say my heart sings. So I wanted to thank you, and I'm excited that you're just coming out with it, or you're it's been published now here in the States in English. So, but there's a couple more questions here that I had written down that I wanted to talk to you about, and I think addiction is such an important one because I think especially for abuse survivors, we find a way to cope. We find a way. I mean, I know I disconnected from my heart because it was too painful. It was just not safe as a child, but I found unhealthy ways to stay distracted, addicted to something else to keep that pain. And I know that's those statistics are pretty high for people in addiction, that they have abuse or trauma in their past. So can you tell us, why is absence an addiction, and what's that connection to like other kinds of addictions?
Well, there obviously this is my contention, and so I can only speak from there. I have only seen one addiction in my career, and that's the addiction to absence, to be preoccupied by your story, and then how you sustain that story, which I call the illusion. And that's also what I refer to as the spell, because we're spellbound, and then we sustain the spell. So, people talk about food addiction, they talk about computer addiction, they talk about substances, they talk about various different things. Mm-hmm. But all of those substances are serving the purpose of absence, to preoccupy you because you can't tolerate yourself. And that intolerance we're not born into not tolerating ourselves, but the dialogue that we have created as a society is always about not being good enough. Mm-hmm. The whole aspect of marketing is about convincing you that you are at a lack or fault, and I have the solution to your well-being. And my dialogue is different. My dialogue is that you are the master of your journey, your destiny, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. You are complete, is in this expression, this moment. So when you're present, you need nothing. And, the book that I wrote called Presence is Power, the working title for that book was, If Something is Missing in Your Life, It's You. So all of our attempts, addictions or preoccupations, are some form of what we would call crisis management, but fight and flight, reactive compulsive behaviors, mm-hmm. masking the pain, or somehow preoccupying ourselves or entertaining ourselves because mm-hmm. we are so boring and aggressive and mean that we can't mm-hmm. tolerate our own existence. Now, this sounds very brutal, but what are we running away from?
Yes.
If we're not running away from ourselves?
That's right. Yeah, it's brutal. I don't know. Yeah, but it's like you say, it's the truth, and it only feels brutal if because it's upsetting something inside of me. Then it's probably the truth.
Very well put.
Exactly.
And let me just add to that so that I don't leave the listener in some vacuum. Mm-hmm. My other contention is that there is only one disease, and that disease is a constrained heart. And there's only one reason, and that reason is abandonment or rejection, personal rejection. Mm-hmm. We constrain our own heart, and we're protecting it because we're emotionally wounded on some level, and that we sustain that wound through our behavior to ourselves by arguing for our limitations. But then there's only one remedy, and that remedy is love. And if you're not healing, it's because you're not using a big enough dose, literally.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
And I agree with you. I agree. Absolutely. So thank you. There was another term that came up for me that I'm not sure how to pronounce it or what it means. I'm me, mine.
Yeah, in Iceland, there's a I, me, mine is what the ego is all about. Protecting our own story, our perception of the world.
Okay.
And again, the only miracle that I've ever experienced, and I've experienced many, is when you change your perspective, everything changes. Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example. I have a huge task on my hands right now, and I've been challenged by it. I have to admit that I've been challenged, and it's been an interesting challenge, and it's not wearing me out. However, the other day on Wednesday morning, it was probably a little tired, but I noticed that I on 2 different occasions used the terms I will never give up. I will never give up. I will make this happen. It wasn't really that terminology, but I won't give up was basically the message. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, what do you mean you won't give up? And all of a sudden I realized that just the concept of not giving up brought me back to when I was 8 years old and some bully was trying to force me to give up. And I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't have it. And so there's an element of me that is very resistant to violence and to any kind of control, and I refuse to give up. And I said to myself, that's not the attitude to be carried here. Change your perspective. You're a winner. You're going to succeed. Mm-hmm. And that the instance I changed my perspective, my view from succeeding to succeeding, from surviving or not giving up, my energy and spirit came back, and I was rejuvenated. Mm. So it's like, are you looking up or are you looking down?
That's right.
And these are minuscule things. It's like, who's breathing? The body has 24 to 26,000 opportunities a day to rejuvenate and inspire itself and fill it with light and love and oxygen and what we would call spirit, to be inspired. Who's managing those breathing patterns? Is there anybody there?
Wow. Yeah. That sounds like a big challenge, but at the same time, challenge worth taking.
Was the biggest opportunity you have to be present and powerful. If you're present to your breath, then you're meditating to some degree all the time.
Yes. That's amazing. So, well, I mean, you said so many things that, click, 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 I can relate to and connect to. And I want to touch upon the 7 steps that you write about in your book, and I want to give you a time to touch upon each of those, because you're also going to tell our audience more about the book. But what's the most important element? We maybe have said it more than once, and sometimes I tell people when I'm speaking, if I say something 3 or 4 times, it's probably the very thing you needed to learn. So I think it's okay if we repeat ourselves here. But as we go into talking about those 7 steps and how are they connected, like, what's the most important element of that personal empowerment process?
Responsibility, definitely. Okay. However, if you haven't awakened to the fact that you're not your thoughts, and when we think we're our thoughts, which is interesting, that we're compulsive, obsessive thinkers. Mm-hmm. And so the moment we awaken, we have the opportunity to become responsible for the energy. Mm-hmm. We're not responsible for what happened to our lives, in essence, because it was an unconscious process to a large degree, and it's a collective environment, mm-hmm. families and units and all kinds of energy at play. Mm-hmm. But the moment you become responsible for how you allocate your next breath, you have become a conscious creator versus an unconscious calamity. Mm. So, and responsibility is the cornerstone of self-respect. Your self-respect becomes the framework for your self-image. And that self-image is what's being projected into the field all the time. How we view ourselves is either empowered or disempowered. Mm-hmm. So step number 2 is extremely powerful, because when you forgive yourself, you're actually saying, I'm going to love myself instead of reject myself. I'm going to move in instead of move out. So then what happens is that the moment you forgive yourself, you're retrieving all of the energy. The average person devotes about 85 to 95% of his energy, his resources, to feeling sorry for himself or herself.
Wow.
On average, we are rejecting ourselves 800 times a day and more, abandoning ourselves. So the moment you forgive yourself, you have a lot of energy at your fingertips. Mm-hmm. And that energy is what I have people allocate to what I call purpose. Purpose becomes the foundation for for your happiness. And when the moment we become purposeful in life, we become inspired. That inspiration is the fuel for your vision. And then the vision becomes the outline for your goals. Now, earlier I said, if we don't want to define what we want, then we're always thinking about what we don't want, because the brain just can't process two things at the same time. And purpose is the why of life. The moment I decide to allow my light to be of service to myself and my environment, then I'm living a purposeful life. So purpose becomes the way to sustain a journey of illumination or clear intention based on inspiration versus motivation, which is always a fear-based process. Now, then step number 4 is what I call commitment. And commitment is I love commitment, because when you finally commit to something, someone, yourself, the universe moves at the same rate. It takes you seriously and realizes that you're all in. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's your goals or your relationship or whatever it is. The moment you commit, you're all in. You're all in heart. You realize that your word is sacred, and when you keep it, you become trustworthy. Now, here is where the interesting process aspect of my sort of 7 steps is, I would say, radical, because my contention is that everything in our lives is based on what I call permission or allowance. That we are not going to allow ourselves to feel or be beyond what we feel we're worthy of. And the word commitment, when we start telling the truth and become integrous, then we become trustworthy. And the reason why we become trustworthy is because we learn to trust ourselves. If we keep our word, then we become trustworthy. Now, we often hear people talk about discipline, and discipline is usually associated with some kind of force. It's true, but the word discipline means to tell the truth and keep your word. That's all it means. It doesn't mean anything else. So the moment we become trustworthy, our permission to process energy, to receive love, to be with love is increased. Because the challenge is we don't feel worthy. And therefore we reject the love or the prosperity or the money or the opportunities. And all of us have had situations where we have, whether it's another human being that we've attracted or opportunities or money, we have retracted these opportunities because we couldn't process it. On a heart-based level, we didn't feel worthy of it. So we felt shame or some kind of disempowerment, and it just didn't feel right. So we push it away. So step number 4 is exceedingly powerful in that sense, because if you don't increase your worthiness or how you feel about yourself, then nothing's going to change. Step number 5 is about progression. And progression, I love that step because it reveals my permission. Because my language, the way I dress, my posture, how I carry myself, and how I communicate to the world is just an expression of broadcasting my self-worth, my self-image, how I feel about myself. So everything I say, and I sometimes, jokingly, I say, I love when I judge other people. And everybody goes, what do you mean? And I say, well, the reason I love it is because I can only judge myself. So when I judge other people, I reveal my insecurities and I can do something about it. So because to will is to act. It's not to hope or desire or to long or to walk. It's only to act. So in step number 5, which is progression, we're literally proving how much worth we feel, because our actions will reveal that.
Can I jump in there, especially on the advancement, because I always feel we worry about what other people think about our progress, right? If I'm too successful, and this is I think also the culture we live in. It's like, well, how can you have it if I can't have it? Or how do you speak to that? Even just being so at peace with yourself and feeling proud of yourself, it's threatening to other people.
Yes and no.
Okay.
It's only threatening to other people as long as it's threatening to you.
Okay, thank you.
So our insecurity is sort of broadcast and project it onto them, and then we use them to sustain our insecurity. It's another form of judgment. It's like, for instance, when I judge someone, I'm using them to reflect my insecurity. So I'm trying to step on their shoulders to elevate myself using them. And just I just thought of something. There's only one thing I feel is uglier than feeling sorry for someone, and that is not trusting our children. So we're constantly using other people to reflect our security or insecurity or disempowerment. And judgment is always about revealing that insecurity, because you can only judge yourself. You can't judge anyone else. Just like you can't forgive yourself. You can only forgive yourself. You can't forgive other people.
Yes.
Same thing, same thing.
Yeah.
So every time I open my mouth, somebody else doesn't come out. I come out.
That's very true.
Right. So, and it's interesting. And step number 5 is really about using that advancement or that progression to understand what you really, really feel like versus what you think you feel like, because it's completely obvious.
Yes.
And so what we allow ourselves is what we feel worthy of. So we have to change how we feel about ourselves in order to expand that worthiness and our ability to receive. And I was, one of my challenges and opportunities was I've always been able to attract a lot of energy. But because of my belief systems, I wasn't able to sustain it and receive it and harness it. And obviously, I've come a long way, and I'm increasing my ability to open my heart and receive the gifts of life. But it's been a journey, and it's going to keep being a journey.
Yes, yes.
So just to run through the steps, step number 5 is advancement. Step number 6 is then what I call insight. And when you obtain insight, you're no longer viewing from the mind, you're viewing from the heart, from the integrity of the heart versus the duality of the mind. And there are no attachments. There's no judge, jury, or executioner. There's only the witness, the awareness, the witness. And if you falter, you help yourself up. You don't kick yourself when you're down. And it's a process of constant observation without any kind of attachment, guilt, or judgment. And it's a very peaceful place. We go in and out, but you sense a completely different world. It's no longer hostile. It's friendly. It's peaceful. It's harmonious.
That's beautiful.
And these steps they're interesting because they obviously all the steps are in one another, but they build upon. And then step number 7, and I always joke with people. I say, if you really don't have the tolerance to go through the whole journey, then just do step number 7. And they say, what is that? And I say, gratitude. Gratitude. It's like once you start counting your blessings versus your curses, your life is going to change. It's going to completely become radically different. And I say, it's if you I'm going to tease them again, and I say if you miss step number 4, you're going to miss being generous. That's okay. Gratitude is enough to begin with, because generosity lives in the heart. Yes. And when we're generous, we know that there's enough of everything. We don't have to really hoard the energy. The more you give, the more you get. But gratitude is bliss. It's enlightenment. And it's not about thinking about gratitude, which a lot of people do. It's truly about feeling it. And when you feel gratitude, you feel so blessed that it nurtures every cell in your body, and your environment is permeated by it. And that's what I call having your glow on, literally being lit up with the process of the emotion of gratitude and love.
Mm-hmm. Well, my tears are starting to run down my face as you're reading this. It's really beautiful, and I'm hopeful because I it resonates what you're saying, and I think I've had those experiences. Hope not all the time, but I'm getting there. But and why I'm so glad that you're here with us, Guðni, because I know you keep referring back to. You have these tools and the skills to do this right here, right now. You don't have to go through, process of some elimination, or it's hard work. It's more, if anything, being kind and generous and gentle with yourself. And that's the beauty of it, because so many of us fight the awakening process because we think it's going to be hard and painful. And that's the past. The now and the future can be about peace and gratitude.
Well, what's interesting is that there is no past and never has been, and there is no future. So you're recreating what you perceive as being the past, and you know as well as I do that if I have somebody tell me about their past 7 days in a row, it's going to change depending on how they feel and where they're standing.
Yes.
So, but the point that I'm making is that I'm not undermining the pain or the suffering that we have all encountered on some level. But I'm saying that it's not the pain or the trauma, it's what we do with it, how we leverage it, the racket that we create and the payoff we get from being addicted to a story that doesn't serve our higher purpose. It only serves our lower process. And it sustains us in a state of victimhood and animosity and in a state of guilt and aggression. And it doesn't serve you or it doesn't serve me, and it certainly doesn't serve our families or the planet.
Wow, beautiful. Very well put. So, well, before our time is almost up, but I wanted you to talk. I know you kind of outlined the book for us, but if people want to come and learn more about you, and I know you have an online presence, both on Facebook and Twitter. I mean, where do we want to send people? And I will include a link underneath this video.
Presence is Power. The website will probably be the easiest access.
Okay.
And the book is called Presence is Power, and it's available in all major bookstores and airports and online, obviously. That outlines the 7 steps and is the sort of the precursor for the workshop I do, which is called Presence is Power, the 7-step online workshop. And people can find out more information on the website. And there are other websites that you can actually find on the mother website.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, from the bottom of my heart, Guðni, it's a privilege and a pleasure to be here with you, and I'm so grateful for your journey and for your passion to share this message with the world, because I think, at least I feel, and the people that are coming to me and asking for help, that we're ready for this kind of information. That we want to grow, we want to become enlightened or free ourselves from the burdens of our how we think things should be, and step into something that feels more at peace with who we are, what we really are, and that's love and light. And that's what why I really wanted you to be here and to be a part of this. So thank you again for your time and your wisdom.
The essence of the dialogue is that you're right. We're all waking up to the fact that we're light beings and we're incredibly powerful. And we have a choice, and it's called free will. How do you want to devote the energy? Remembering that it can't be wasted or destroyed. Time can't be destroyed, money can't be wasted. It can only be allocated or devoted to a cause. Food and attention. So it's time for us to realize that we're not disciples. We are masters of our own destiny. And the only way to step into that is through Presence is Power, which is becoming responsible for that energy, for that breath. So I thank you so much for having me on.
It's my pleasure, Guðni. Thank you so much. And I do hope that our audience will go to your website and get your book, because I've read it once, and actually once in Icelandic and now in English, and I know I'll read it again. So thank you very much.
Thank you.